Good evening and welcome to another hour of our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
And I'm Millicent Walker. Here are the headlines. Day 26 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and more shelling reported on Mariupol, with no hopes of people leaving the city and no hopes of humanitarian aid coming in.
EU foreign ministers meet to discuss imposing more sanctions on Russia, especially aimed at the lucrative energy sector.
Last 6 trains and 1 bus. One Ukrainian refugee recounts how she escaped the war in her country to get to Germany.
Well, we begin this evening with Russian troops dispersing a demonstration in the occupied southern city of Kherson in Ukraine by firing on protesters. According to media reports, video footage appeared on social media showing the protesters on a city square with people running and the sound of automatic gunfire. Some reports say stun grenades were also used. Several people are reported to have been injured. The city has seen regular protests against the occupation since Russian troops took over at the beginning of March. It's the latest of only a handful of cities captured by Russian forces since the invasion last month.
Well, it's the 26th day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Moscow's forces are still encircling major cities, with explosions heard in Kiev's Podil district, killing at least 8 people, while Russia's defense ministry says that Russian air forces hit Ukrainian army military facility with cruise missiles. But while the bombardment continues, the Ukrainian forces continue to hold their own. There are fears of Ukrainian children in danger of being trafficked, as about half of 3.3 million Ukrainians who had fled to EU countries since the start of the war are children. Here's a summary of the situation on the ground.
Russia's assault on Ukraine, now in its 4th week, has continued with an explosion which rocked the site of a devastated shopping arena in Kiev's Podil district today, a place that was earlier hit by shelling that killed at least 8 people. The cause of the explosion was not known. Smoke could be seen rising from the shopping mall area following a loud sound of an explosion. Staying in the city, drone footage showed the scale of the damage caused by shelling, which hit residential houses and a shopping district in Kiev's Podil district late on Sunday. The shelling killed at least 8 people, according to Ukraine's prosecutor general, after a relative lull over the weekend. The mayor of Kiev today announced a reinforced curfew in the Ukrainian capital from 8 p.m. until 7 a.m. on Wednesday.
The enemy continues to attack the capital. During the night, rescuers have been putting out a fire in the Podilsky district for a long time, where a shopping center burned down and 6 residential buildings were damaged as a result of the shelling. 3 of them, unfortunately, are no longer livable. 8 people were killed. The premises of 2 schools and 2 kindergartens were also damaged. Because of the fires, after the airstrikes, there is air pollution in the capital and the region. Therefore, please do not open the windows, and when going outside, protect your lungs by wearing a FFP2 type medical respirator.
Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said that Russian Air Force hit Ukrainian army military facility in Rivne region with cruise missiles.
High-precision air-launched cruise missiles have struck a training center for foreign mercenaries and Ukrainian nationalist formation in Nova at a military training ground in Rivne region. Over 80 mercenaries and nationalists were eliminated.
The Konashenko's statement was partially overlaid with drone footage showing strikes in unidentified locations without any date given. Trying to mediate an end to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Israeli Prime Minister says big gaps remain in a bid to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict despite some progress. Big gaps remained between the sides. On Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky chided Israel in an address to his parliament, asking why it was not providing missile defenses to his country or sanctioning Russia over its invasion. Israeli Prime Minister says big gaps remain in a bid to end Ukraine-Russia conflict. Also, the European Union's Migration Commissioner has warned the Ukrainian children were in danger of being trafficked as they flee their country due to the Russian invasion. Vlad Johansson told a news conference in Estonia that about half of 3.3 million Ukrainians who had fled to EU countries since the start of the war were children. She said that so far there had been very few unaccompanied children reported at EU borders and some reports of trafficking.
We have seen very few unaccompanied minors being registered. We have seen few reports of trafficking. But I have to tell you that this is really a concern. We know that we have a lot of orphans in Ukraine. We know that we have children being that are being born by surrogate mothers that have not been picked up by their parents. There is a huge risk of vulnerable children being trafficked or being victim of false adoption.
Meanwhile, the Chinese Red Cross says it will offer an additional 10 million yuan, that's $1.57 million of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. China's promise of aid follows previous pledges of aid to Ukraine, including one of 5 million yuan from earlier this month.
The Chinese government has decided to provide another batch of humanitarian aid worth 10 million yuan to Ukraine. This is China's newly added humanitarian aid to Ukraine based on the development of the situation and actual needs. China will continue to play a constructive role in promoting the de-escalation of the situation in Ukraine and is willing to make its own efforts to overcome the humanitarian crisis.
Wang's comments at a regular news briefing in Beijing came days after U.S. President Joe Biden warned his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on Friday of consequences if Beijing gave material support to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The VOA's Anna Chennikova is in Ivano-Frankivsk in Ukraine. Anna, thank you for joining us. Has it been relatively peaceful where you are?
Hello. Yes, situation in the region, in the western region of Ukraine, is more or less fine, and nevertheless, we have sirens almost every day as well, but nothing serious is happening.
And let's talk about the Russian soldiers firing on the protesters in Kherson. We heard that just before we got into the studio. We're also hearing reports that stun grenades were used in that attack. Can you give us some more details on the situation in Kherson?
Yes, the city of Kherson, which was occupied, the only one that has been occupied so far, they have all these meetings quite often, almost every day they have meetings in support of Ukraine. And today, during the meeting, Russian military started to shoot people, and they used grenades as well. A couple of people being shot. According to the latest information, some are very dangerously injured and heavy injuries are reported, but not yet. The estimation that it might be casualties, but we don't have yet final information on that.
It's really worrisome what we're hearing coming from Kherson, because we've also tried talking to persons there on the ground who have not been able to leave, hoping for a humanitarian corridor. But the attacks on Mariupol is still top in the news. Where are we regarding a humanitarian corridor?
Unfortunately, it seems that Russian military and Russian government are not going to allow the green corridor from Mariupol to happen. I was talking to a couple of people who managed to escape Mariupol, and they all say that it's hell right now in Mariupol. 80% of the buildings are destroyed. There is no building which left without any harm, so all the buildings in the city have been actually bombed, or at least at least targeted. So people there live without food, water, medications. The only possibility to leave the city is to use the private cars, and this is exactly how these people left. But Russian government, Russian representatives didn't allow humanitarian aid from Ukrainian side to enter. the city, and still as we see for the moment, that is no possibility because Russian authorities proposed Mariupol city to just, to stop fighting, and then the humanitarian aid would be allowed. But Mariupol officials said that this is not a possibility.
So, Anna, in your assessment, what are the corridors that are working, that aren't being shut and people are leaving, can be evacuated?
So, every day is different. So every day we have at least 9 corridors working. It's Kiev region, Kharkiv region, Sumy region, Kherson, unfortunately not, but in Mariupol is always under the discussion. So for now, Sumy was evacuated, and in Sumy region, they had evacuations. A lot of people been escaped and been saved from Sumy. Kiev region as well. Anyway, shellings continue, but still people are able to leave not from every part of Kiev region, but some main points were possible. Kharkiv region similarly, but now for the last couple of days, the evacuation stopped because of the shelling. So I would say that Sumy and Mariupol with private vehicles were the most successful. But again, Mariupol, it's a complicated situation.
Even if it is successful, it is pretty dangerous trying to get out with those Russian forces standing guard and just watching everything going on. You mentioned Kiev, and there have been bombardments in Kiev as well. This morning, there was a report of an attack on a shopping center. Tell us more about that.
Yes, it was a huge shock last night, late at night in the evening. This happened. So this is a Kiev location, Kiev area, the city of Kiev, a huge shopping mall which was just opened 2 years ago. So it was a very popular place for civilians. It was very pretty new, and it was located just in the middle of the civil area. So a lot of civil buildings around schools and kindergartens. There were 2 explosions. One explosion was with the of the rocket, so it was it was a direct enter, and another one was the destruction of the rocket. So the shopping mall is completely destroyed. 8 buildings are damaged. 3 of them most probably would not be available to continue to live in. Very serious damages, but thanks God it was quite late at night, so not a lot of people were, no people were outside, but some people, so we have confirmed 8 casualties so far from those who lived around.
Wow. Pretty intense situation in Kiev. Anna, thank you for reporting on this so far. But we're just wondering, as we sit here and we're listening to you report on this, wondering, what, you're hearing is being reported about the attacks in Ukraine, in Russia.
Come again, in Russia?
I'm sure that Ukrainians still receive some Russian media, news media. Just wondering what you're hearing from that side, from the other side of the fence, about how they're reporting what's happening in Ukraine.
Well, from what I've heard and what we can hear in Ukraine, all the shellings which are happening, Russian media are presented as those that Ukrainian army is conducting. So their position is that everything what is happening is done by Ukrainian military, because Russian forces only target military objects. But it's no one, obviously, from the civilians, no one believes in that. And even in the cities which are now occupied, and they only have Russian TV present. They don't believe in this because everybody knows. Oh, I'm sorry.
No
Because
worries,
everybody
Anna.
knows that Ukrainian military is not, this is not the way that Ukrainian military is acting with civilians, especially. So again, obviously they are blaming Ukrainian army, and they're trying to to present it as they've been saving people. But again, we can see the destructions. We can see how this is a real war which is happening, and people clearly understand that if they would never come, this would never happen.
But Anna, what are you hearing regarding negotiations and the ceasefire? Because some days we hear there's progress, other days we're hearing it's perhaps just a smokescreen.
Officially there is certain progress, but again, in Ukraine, we don't really believe that this would help or this would lead to any ceasefire or conclusion, because what it seems is just that this negotiation is kind of time for Russian forces to rethink their next move, because when ceasefire negotiations are happening, normally there is no shelling on the civilians. And what we can see and experience now is that every time we have negotiations, Russian forces would either shell Mariupol or Kharkiv or Kiev. So some really severe things are happening. So Ukrainians don't really believe that this would be, the way out. And Ukrainians, they are very positive about the outcome, and they are ready to fight, and they're ready to fight for their land, for their independence, and for their life, because this is how it is considered, that this is the only way to survive, and to survive in this country, and to have, to have a future. So unfortunately, but again, we always believe that negotiation, can at least change certain, certain approaches, because it should always be a diplomatic way. So we just hope that this would help, but people do not see it as the only way out. So it should only be, kind of a little key to the final result. But again, the fighting is what people are ready to.
VOA's Anna Chennikova, thanks so much. Continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
In the meantime, the head of the Ukrainian Forum at London-based international affairs think tank Chatham House, Orsia Lusevich, says the battle for Ukrainian city of Mariupol is symbolic for both Kiev and Moscow and will prove hard to hold should it fall to Russia. Mariupol, a port city of Azov Sea, has been under siege and bombardments with no food, medicine, power or fresh water since the early days of the Russian invasion on February 24. According to video footage, the city, which is home to 400,000 people before the invasion, now shows it has been devastated.
Mariupol is the home ground to the Azov Battalion, a far-right Ukrainian militia unit. And she says that the defense of the city plays a role in Russia's strategic calculation.
Well, the city of Mariupol has already been under the heavy siege for almost 3 weeks, and people are holding inside the city without electricity, water. There's a very dire humanitarian situation. The thing is that, of course, they can hold for some time longer. Mariupol is, as a strategic port, has been protected intentionally, and over the last 8 years, as the war was raging with Russian Federation, Mariupol was very close to the previous contact line with the occupied territories of Donbass. Even if Russians take over and install a puppet mayor and a puppet military administration, they will still have to deal with resistance, and that is why the city is not capitulating. Mariupol is kind of a home ground for Azov battalion that has a very high combat resolve and experience that has liberated the city from Russian occupation in 2015. And I think personally it's a revenge against this battalion because they have reclaimed the city in 2014, and Putin really wants to show that he can take back what he believes belongs to him. So I think there's also this story of revenge that he wants to demonstrate on Russian television, captured fighters of Azov battalion. Russia's plan is to take control over the city, to control the port, to link it up to Crimea, and they will not bother too much with providing for the populations. They are likely, for those who would like to evacuate from Mariupol, they will be able to go inside Russia.
Day 26 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and more Russian shelling still going on in different cities. Mariupol now bearing the heat of the attacks from the Russian forces. Joining us now is former Permanent Secretary at the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi, thank you for your patience and for joining us today. Welcome to the program. But let's begin with your thoughts on Russia's recent strategy in this war, and that is a target on civilian populations. Russia denies that this is its goal, but in the last week, between last week and this week, Russia has bombed a theater where people were taking shelter in Mariupol. And then on Sunday was an art school where people were sheltering from Russian shelling. And there were more attacks on Kiev and on Mariupol, even attacks on a group of protesters in Kherson.
I think it's really, on one hand, it's very shameful that the Russians, I believe that they watch a number of news outlets, and they are seeing the devastation they are causing in Ukraine, and they are still denying that this is not going on. Number one, I think it's very shameful. Number two, it's just sad that the rest of the world, that we are watching the destruction of a country, and little or nothing is being done actually for the world to come together and really compel Russia, to solve this senseless and heartless bombing of non-military targets. I mean, there's nobody who can deny that these are military targets. You are bombing schools, you are bombing supermarkets or, malls, you are bombing hospitals, you are bombing, theaters. And you are saying that, again, it calls to question, concerns at the start of this war. What exactly is Putin's game plan? Is it to psychologically defeat the people of Ukraine or to have them permanently under Russian control or not? It's very difficult to fathom. Your last speaker indicated that they are trying to connect Crimea to one of these ports in Ukraine. Does it mean that they just want to make Ukraine a landlocked so that they will become dependent on Russia? Very difficult to understand exactly why Putin is doing all this. I mean, but it's heart-rending, and I think the world needs to stand up and get involved and stop this senseless bombing of innocent civilians in Ukraine.
I believe the port you're referring to, Ambassador, is the port at Odessa. And if Russia takes that port, that will mean that Ukraine would be landlocked because it would be controlling all of the cities, around that area. But then let's get into the mind of the Russian president just a little bit, Vladimir Putin. What would be the target, though, of attacking civilians in this war?
Look, nobody can deny that civilians are not being targeted. You are hitting them at night. You are hitting private buildings. You are hitting residential areas at night. And you are saying you are not targeting civilians? No, that's not true. I mean, we can all, yes, we are not on the ground, but we can all see, just go to any major network, and you will see this evidence that most of Russian hits are civilian, residential areas, supermarkets or malls and the rest of it. They can't deny this. I mean, the age in which they can deny this when there are no global television or reporters on the ground has gone. I mean, we are seeing this live. We are sitting here in Nigeria. We're able to see what's going on in Ukraine live. You know, again, I make the point that the world really needs to come together, irrespective of what ideological belief you hold, and find a way to stop what is going on in Ukraine. It's unfair for everybody to keep quiet. You know, and I sincerely hope the United Nations will get seriously involved and mobilize world opinion. Because as it is now, nobody really understands Putin's game plan, and that's about the worst thing when you get into a situation like this. If you can see the game plan and say, okay, when they get to this point, they will stop. But there's no game plan. You can't even understand it. Well, maybe they do understand what they are trying to do, but you don't have to destroy a nation to make your point or to show your anger. This is my point.
There have been a number of analyses into getting into what President Putin is thinking, and lots of people giving different opinions. But while negotiations are ongoing, the Russian government says there will be no ceasefire because, this is according to the government spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, any pause is used by the nationalist units to regroup and then used to against the Russian military. And he claims that Russian troops in Ukraine have experienced this before on multiple occasions. Where do you think this should leave negotiations?
Look, if Putin is serious, it is possible to arrange a ceasefire. The United Nations can actually organize a peacekeeping into Ukraine, and everybody will hold their grounds until there's a final settlement. This has been done elsewhere. So it's not only, so Putin and the Russians shouldn't make it as if it's very difficult. In any case, look, we must allow the Ukrainians to fight for their, for their country and for themselves, to defend themselves. So if they take advantage, if they decide to fight back, they're doing the right thing. You are not going to wait and somebody comes to your house and then you say you are not going to do anything. No, you will defend yourself.
But some have said they're fighting a losing battle.
Beg your pardon?
Some have said that they are fighting a losing battle.
Well, look, let them make that decision themselves. Let them be the judge of what they are doing. So far, look, we are talking of a superpower against a country that is not a superpower. We are close to the first month. Everybody thought that this would end so quickly, that Russia will overrun Ukraine. Here we are. How many cities are they holding? Very few, one or two. But they've destroyed more cities rather than hold the cities. So let's give Ukrainian credit that they are fighting, as far as they are concerned, they are fighting a just cause. They want to defend themselves, they want to defend their country, and they have the right to do that.
Now, Russia has demanded the Ukraine give up Mariupol, the city that's currently under attack. By 5 p.m. local time today, Ukraine has refused, saying we will not surrender. What would be the game plan for Russia here if it does take over Mariupol? What would that mean for President Putin, and what would that mean for Ukraine?
I'm not too sure that would please the Russian leader. I just think that they have a game plan to completely take over the country itself. But my question is, if you want to take over a country, must you destroy it before you do that? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Ambassador, I know the Nigerian government is considering how relations with these two countries will change when this war is over. How does this war impact bilateral, multilateral relations between Nigeria, Russia, Nigeria and Ukraine, and then all three?
Look, the truth is that nothing much will change because we've not been directly involved in this. I wish we had actually done more to reach out to the two parties and begin to encourage them to make peace. But our bilateral relationship would continue as it has been. I'm not expecting that there will be major changes, irrespective of whatever decision we took at the United Nations.
And what do you mean do more? Try to mediate?
Yeah, look, you see, the way things are today, everybody should be concerned. Any president that decides to make a phone call to the Russian president or to make a call to the Ukrainian president, urging them to make peace, is intervening. And so I don't see why we shouldn't, encourage even our leaders to do that. And the rest, leaders from Africa should actually get in. Everybody around the world should begin to put pressure on these gentlemen to make peace for the sake of their respective countries.
Ambassador Joe Keshi, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for making time to join us today on the program. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, EU ministers are meeting in Brussels today, calls from some member states have been on for sanctions on Russia to target its lucrative energy sector at the start of a week of intense diplomacy aimed at agreeing more steps against Russia.
The EU and its Western allies have already imposed a range of sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. The humanitarian crisis in the city of Mariupol is increasing pressure on Europe to do more.
The European Union and its Western allies have already imposed a range of sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, including freezing its central bank's assets. The humanitarian crisis in the besieged port city of Mariupol is increasing pressure on Europe to do more. The foreign ministers of Lithuania and Ireland at the start of a week of intense diplomacy say the European Union should step up sanctions on Russia to target its lucrative energy sector.
Europe cannot look or give an impression of fatigue when the war in Ukraine has not ended. We cannot get tired imposing sanctions. We cannot get tired offering assistance and help to Ukraine.
Looking at the extent of the destruction in Ukraine right now, it's very hard, in my view, to make the case that we shouldn't be moving into the energy sector, particularly oil and coal, in terms of interrupting normal trade in that space.
But whether to target Russian oil, as the United States and Britain have done, is a tough and divisive choice for the 27-nation EU, which relies on Russia for 40% of its gas. Some diplomats say that the Baltic countries, including Lithuania, are pushing for an embargo as the next logical step, while Germany, which very much depends on Russian gas, is warning against acting too quickly because of already high energy prices in Europe.
We would also, from the Danish side, support the most possible, strongest sanctions that we can agree upon, including also, for example, access to seaports or over land for Russia and Belarusian transportation, but also other type of sanctions. We are ready to look at doing more because we need to stop this aggression.
For EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, a massive war crime is happening at Mariupol, and Russia is doing a lot of war crimes.
Russia is really doing a lot of war crimes. That's the word. We have to say that. What's happening in Mariupol is a massive war crime, destroying everything, bombarding and killing everybody in an indiscriminated manner. This is something awful. We have to condemn in the stronger terms. This is a war crime, a massive war crime, what's happening in Mariupol. The city will be completely destroyed and people are dying.
Defense ministers will also discuss a strategic compass, a new EU military strategy meant to adapt the bloc to a new geopolitical reality. Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24. Putin has called Russia's actions a special operation meant to demilitarize Ukraine and purge it of what he sees as dangerous nationalists. Ukraine and the West say these are baseless pretexts for an aggressive war.
I want to bring in now foreign affairs commentator Collins Weke and international affairs analyst Sonny Ekwewusi. Collins is in Brussels. Sonny is in Ogun State. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Collins, let's begin with you, seeing as you are close enough to where, those EU ministers are holding that meeting. The leaders are considering more sanctions for Russia. They've touched on almost every sector, but we've been dancing around Russia's energy supply. You think that that cutting off Russia's energy, Russia's oil, maybe the blow needed to bring President Putin to stop this war on Ukraine?
It's hard to do not think so, because you know very well that sanctions are not deterrent. from history, what we have learned so far, sanctions that have been imposed on Cuba so many years did not deter Cuba from doing what they wanted to do. Sanctions against Iran did not deter Iran. So sanctions are no solution. It's not about imposing more sanctions. It's about coming to the negotiating table, between the two warring parties to a negotiating table and try to end the war. They think the Ukrainian leader is well disposed to resolution of this war. And also, I think Putin is also willing. So I think that what EU should do is to bring the warring parties to a negotiating table and to find a way out of this war. It's not about sanctions. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, they knew that there were going to be sanctions, and they prepared for it. And you know that at the end of the day, sanctions always hurt the ordinary persons. It doesn't even hurt the elites, or the political leaders, because they have the way of coming out of it, the ordinary person.
Collins, you were supposed to answer that question. What are your thoughts on this? And is this the final blow for President Putin, bringing him to his knees?
Sorry,
Collins, please. Collins, please.
Yeah, well, yes, thank you, Amarachi. Well, obviously, there are some points, to pick from the comments made by my colleague about sanction not being, the best of solutions. But of course, sanction does have its impact, in terms of actually strengthening the position of, the people that are actually giving the sanction. And yes, indeed, sanctions usually have a way of hurting both sides, okay? But of course, when they are measured, as it happens to be the case in the EU sanction against Russia, of course, it does have more devastating impact on the other side. And again, diplomacy is always, the final solution, because ultimately, after all the bombings, after all the sanctions and so on and so forth, the parties have to sit down on the table. So that is why proponents of diplomacy always say, I mean, if ultimately you are going to sit down and talk, why don't you, talk and rule out every other option? But you see, it is not as easy as that. Before when, Russia actually invaded, there were a series of talks, and as we speak, talks are ongoing. Like you mentioned, Amarachi, the EU leaders are actually negotiating and mediating as we speak right now. But essentially what they are doing is actually trying to assess the impact of further sanctions, for example, the energy, because obviously what they are doing is phased out sanctions, beginning with luxury goods and so on and so forth, and then it's like leaving the best bullet to be fired, at the last minute. And I believe that is where they are now, in terms of now going for oil. But before doing that, they are actually working on alternatives to oil supply, that is natural gas and oil, because the dependence on Russia is so very, very high that doing it without due care will hurt them, the EU, so very, very badly. And that is why, they are measuring it and considering all the options, ahead of, in front of them. But sanction does work, and that is essentially what they are beefing up this time around.
And Mr. Nweke, do you think that Russia needs more sanctions? I mean, the EU is meeting about that. They've had over 5,000 sanctions on Russia alone. But, at this point, looking at where the invasion has gotten to, does Russia need more sanctions?
Yes, Russia does need more sanctions, but Russia also needs diplomacy. So it is like Arafat said, going to your negotiating partners with the olive branch in one hand and AK-47 on the other hand, and then, let the partner choose which one is more suitable. I believe that the AK-47 here, as far as the EU is concerned, is, a sanction, or oil sanction. And then the olive branch is diplomacy, because, they continue to, they continue to negotiate, they continue to talk, sometimes indirectly, sometimes directly as well, while they are also bidding their time to actually consider other alternative energy source, energy switch, so that they don't run into very serious problem by the time Russian oil is finally cut off. And let me tell you what the ultimate goal of the EU is. The ultimate goal is that when eventually these sanctions begin to affect the ordinary Russians, the propaganda that President Putin has actually deployed to keep information away from the people will no longer work, because once people are not able to lead a normal life anymore, revolts, protests, and all of that will, civil unrest generally will take place. And I believe that is one of the purposes of the EU in some of the sanctions that they have, put in place and considering to go the whole hog with oil.
Thank you, Mr. Beke. Mr. Sonny, I'm hoping that you're still with us. Just before we go on a pretty short break, I know the targeting Russian oil is already hurting major supply markets around Europe and the United States, which have for years depended on Russian oil. Will this decision backfire on other markets as well? Well,
Mr. It's already backfiring in the sense that all non-users of oil and users of oil will be affected. It also depends whether the country is an oil-producing country. If it's an oil-producing country, as a non-oil-producing country, of course, it's going to hurt them badly. And as we speak, many of them are thinking about alternatives to Russian oil, finding a way. The U.S., I know very well, is talking with the Kuwait and other, and going to other smaller like Saudi Arabia, alternative. Of course, it's going to work. But like I said earlier, and I think that sanctions, of course, will fire the zeal of the Russians to continue in the war, to continue to invade Ukraine. Because before invading Ukraine, they have thought about it. And they knew that sanction was going to come. I think they are hell-bent in ensuring that they get what they want. That is the next, which is very bad. And also, they have also passed information to ordinary Ukraine and ordinary Russian that this war is everything for them, And so even the ordinary Russian is going along with Putin that this war should be fought to its ultimate end, sanctions or no sanctions.
Sonny Ekwusi and Collins Weke, gentlemen, thank you for being with us this evening. New Zealand says it will provide Ukraine with a further $5 million New Zealand dollars in funds and non-lethal military assistance, including some surplus equipment. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced this earlier today. She said the money will be primarily directed to a NATO trust fund that provides fuel, rations, communication equipment and first aid kits to support Ukraine. Now, this brings New Zealand's total assistance to Ukraine to 11 million New Zealand dollars. The New Zealand Defence Force will provide tactical equipment such as body armor, helmets and vests that are surplus to requirements, according to Jacinda Ardern.
Ukrainian officials say Russian shells have hit a chemical plant near the northeastern city of Sumy, causing an ammonia leak. The region's governor, residents of Novosibirsk near Sumy, were told to stay indoors, but the region's governor later said the leak had been contained. Local officials say the 50-ton tank of the poison gas was damaged by the attack, creating an ammonia cloud. Ammonia is largely used to make fertilizer and is corrosive. The Sumy Kiprom chemical plant was attended by emergency crews, and the cloud affected an area of about 2.5 kilometers.
Distinguished Professor of Organic and Environmental Chemistry at the University of Lagos, Professor Diallo. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program at this hour, and thank you for your patience. First off, how dangerous was this attack on the gas tank?
Thank you so much, Amarachi and Millicent. It's quite amazing that an ammonia tank will be hit, because exposure to high concentrations of ammonia anywhere causes immediate burning of the eyes, the nose, the throat, and the respiratory tract. And it can result in blindness, lung damage, and several different issues with respect to the breathing system. So it's very dangerous that that will happen. That means that the war is becoming a chemical war, as it were, and it's a dangerous thing for the world and for the system. And yet, I'm sure we're all aware of the fact that there is a prohibition of chemical weaponry. The OPCW, as it's publicly called, the Convention for Prevention of Use of Chemical Weapons. So to find that this is now coming into place, because hitting the ammonia tank means that we are in a situation where they intended, it's fully intentional to hit the ammonia tank so that there is a gas leakage, and then chemical weapons come into use. Ammonia, as we know it, is very lethal, is very dangerous, it causes damages. The body can excrete ammonia, but anytime there is an ammonia attack, you are sure that you are going to get between, for the next 48 hours, everybody in that vicinity will be in danger, and serious danger, because of ammonia poisoning. So I don't know how Ukraine is going to handle that, because chemical weaponry is very difficult to contain, it's very difficult, which is why there is a prohibition globally for use of chemical weapons. But what we're beginning to see is that the inhalation of these concentrations of ammonia will really deal with Ukrainians. And it's unfortunate that this can happen at this moment.
And Professor, I mean, chemical weapons have been introduced. They've been threatened as well. What would be the long-term impact of this on Ukraine?
Well, the long-term impact is the fact that people will get respiratory injuries, which can be for a long time before it wears away. For example, the immediate impact is a 48-hour incapacitation of everybody in the environment of that gas leak, because the liver, which is supposed to detoxify ammonia, takes time, and in fact it has a limit to the ammonia content that can be detoxified. So the impact on the people is going to be horrendous, and it's going to be for a long time. The long-term impact is not going to wear away immediately at all. We don't know that ammonia, once it hits on humans, can easily wear away. No, because the liver is the only route by which we think we can detoxify ammonia, but yet the ammonia concentration coming from a gas tank causing gas leak is going to be a dangerous thing.
So, well, for anyone who hasn't had any contact with ammonia and probably is not familiar with this gas, what would be the first thing that you would notice if you have come in contact with ammonia? What would be the first signs for you?
The first sign would be coughing, nose irritation. People will be sneezing. They will even feel asphyxiated, that is to say, loss of oxygen in their system. And so you find them almost like they're going to sleep from ammonia attack, and they will be coughing and sneezing terribly.
Now that chemical weapons have been introduced and they are prohibited, in a wartime situation, what would be the punishment then for Russia now that it has, well, indirectly attacked Ukraine using chemical weapons?
Amarachi, that's a difficult question for me to answer. The United Nations and the convention, OPCW convention, has sanctions, fully loaded sanctions for any party or any country that decides to introduce chemical weaponry into a war. So that's why at this juncture it's difficult for me to say this will be the sanctions that Russia should have if it's proven that they hit the tank deliberately in order to cause a gas leak because they know it's an ammonia tank, to release ammonia into the air against the Ukrainians.
Distinguished Professor of Organic and Environmental Chemistry at the University of Lagos, Professor Diallo, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much.
And as we end the program today, some 10,000 people attended a concert in solidarity with Ukraine in Berlin on Sunday, with the crowd waving Ukrainian flags or holding banners with slogans opposing the Russian invasion. Gathering near the Brandenburg Gate, a symbol of divided Germany during the Cold War, many performers on the stage wore shades of blue and yellow, the colors of the Ukrainian flag.
Musicians included Natalia Klitschko, the Ukrainian singer who is married to the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko.
Alles das, alles deins, aber ich gehöre mir. Doch nicht in deine ekelhafte Art. Du wolltest mich erpressen, hast mich. Ich gehöre mir. Ich gehöre mir.
Marathi, please translate.
I don't speak German, hope to one day, but I know that Berlin has been, the venue for, mass protests in recent times, especially against Ukraine. Remember a few Sundays ago, there was this mass protest, almost about the same number of people who showed up for then. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi.
I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good evening.